I've worked in men for years, and I can tell you I do not know what many of them are in for. Because I have no interest. What I'm interested in is their future.
Yeah.
They have enough people that are interested in their past, what they've done. I just care so much about their future because that's what they're in control of. And it's about, we need to really empower people that when it comes to your life, make sure they're the ones holding the pen. Don't ever let anyone else hold the pen for you when writing the story of your life.
Hello, Kenny. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to get into your book that's just been released called That Peckham Boy. And before we hear from you about the story, I just want to set it up for our viewers at home and read a little bit on what's on the back of the book. It says, "For the first time ever, I wished I had been caught for something I had actually done. At least it would have been what I deserved. But here I was, 18 years old, kidnapped by the state and staring at a sentence longer than the life I had already lived." So can you take us back to that time, years ago now, but take us back to the time when all of this started to happen and life really turned upside down for you?
Yeah, so in terms of, and you spoke to it earlier, so to help you get the picture of it all, so 2 days literally after turning 18, I was arrested for a murder and 6 other charges under joint enterprise. It was a murder that took place in my area some months beforehand. And so I literally found myself going to Fulton prison and all of a sudden spending 23 hours a day in a cell. And one of the things I did do in prison was me doing my A-levels. So I was the first person to ever sit A-levels in Fulton prison.
Wow.
I passed those exams, and obviously I went to trial at the Old Bailey, and you have to imagine there were 7 of us on trial. Two of the people with me on trial I've never even met before, but they were there for a separate charge which was linked to one of the co-defendants on my case. So for me, I really shared a story in That Peckham Way about what it was like going through this experience, but then at the same time, showing people like, yes, I was acquitted at the end, obviously, hence why I'm here to tell the story, we thank God. But then also at the same time, showing people that though this happened to me, I was able to build my life back up again.
Yes.
Also showing the fact that I actually lived a double life, right? So showing that though I was this prefect in school that left school with 12 GCSEs, right, at the same time I was still in the streets, hustling, making money at the same time. And I lived both of those lives in extreme different parallels.
Yeah. Wow. And the synopsis of the story is growing up, getting out and giving back. And I love that because it really just sum up, you know, what your life has been so far. And we're going to touch a little bit on what you're doing currently with all the different, with Clearview Research and My Brother's Keeper. But before we get into that, what was it like being in that cell and knowing that you were there for something that you didn't do? Did you feel like God was with you in those moments?
No, definitely not. And something which I do talk about in the book, that I really felt like, why would he put me in this position? Like, why am I here? I could potentially be looking at 30 years of my life. And so I just turned 18. I would have came out when I was lucky, when I was 47, right? And this was, for me, I just didn't understand, like, why me? And as I talk about it, as you read the blurb, I was thinking for all the other things that I've done, if I was arrested, charged and found guilty, then fair enough. But to now be looking at potentially the rest of my life being spent here was something that I just didn't understand, couldn't comprehend. And I just didn't feel like I deserved this.
Yeah. Now, a moment in your story, I don't want to share it, I want to hear it in your own words, so I'm not going to give too much away, but share with us what God was really speaking to you about, and also what happened the few days before you got released.
Yeah, no, so coming back to what I said earlier, I went from being this person that was very angry with God to then being the person that became receptive and all of a sudden was inviting him in. I was very self-sufficient and very much wanted to do things on my own. Like, I felt God was more the passenger as opposed to him being the person that's taking the wheel. And that's very much how the relationship was, because I grew up and church was a non-negotiable. You had to go to church. This wasn't like up for discussion. So I knew, like, the Psalms or the different stories, and I was just going with emotions around it, right? So I went to church every Sunday, did all those things, but it didn't really change my heart and how I felt about God. So when I did take that leap, I decided to go to Bible study weekly, learn more about Jesus. And I would say that also learned a lot about the perfect peace that comes with him.
Wow.
Because in prison, I really felt that deep sense of peace that didn't come logically, because the situation I was in, I could be potentially spending 30 years of my life here if I'm found guilty. But I still had this sense of peace knowing that, God was with me. And I would read those Psalms of different scriptures and genuinely believe, like, God will get me through this.
Yeah.
And so what happened during my case, once it got to halfway and the prosecution's case ended, my defense team then applied for me to essentially have my case dismissed because literally there was hardly much evidence against me in the first place, all circumstantial. And so they applied for it and we would find the result the next day. And so, but that evening when I got back, I called my mum on the phone. I was like to my mum, look, please pray for me. Something tells me I'm coming home tomorrow.
Wow.
And so then the next day I woke up early. So you have to imagine when you're on a case in the Old Bailey or you're going to court in prison, you wake up around 4 a.m. Yeah. A lot of times you can't have a shower beforehand. So therefore you actually clean yourself from your sink. You put towels on the ground and you essentially use soap and water and another smaller towel to clean yourself. And so you can imagine it's not the typical experience. People, just because you don't want to go to court like sweaty and feeling very unhygienic. So I did that morning, but I also prayed and was praying and I just heard God tell me that, look, you should pack all your stuff. And when you are with your other co-defendants, don't pray individually, but actually pray collectively together. Because we were praying individually, but not as a group. But that day I really felt that voice as clear as day saying, pack your stuff and pray with everyone. So I did pack my stuff. I wrote a note to give away the other stuff I wasn't going to take with me, like shampoo and other things. I felt I'd give that to other people on the wing. And it was interesting because my other co-defendants said they would also pack as well because some of their teams also applied as well. But when I then met everybody in the holding cell before you go to court, I realized I was the only one that actually packed and took my stuff.
Right.
And so when I went to court, so we got there, it was really interesting. Though I was in the room and everybody's there, I still felt reluctant to like get everybody around to come and say, let's pray together.
Yeah.
But something told me like, look, you need to do this. And I did do that. And I was obedient to that voice. And at the time, so the judge calls like someone to come down to get us. So this person, just after we finished praying, let's say literally 30 seconds, came, opened the door to say, look, the judge has now called you up. So as we're walking up the stairs, now you have to imagine we have been to court for a month now. Every time the judge calls us, he never sends us back, ever, because he's a judge, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's called you, he knows what he needs you for. Halfway up the stairs, we then get a message saying the judge needs more time.
Wow.
And so then we go back downstairs. But this is literally after praying together as the group. So we come down thinking, wow, this is crazy. Like the judges never sent us back.
Yeah.
And then we waited a bit and just prayed more. Then when I got up and then it came to me. So my other friends, they got their cases in terms of denied, their submissions denied. However, when it got to me, I was acquitted by directions of the judge to the jury. And yeah, for me in that moment, my whole life just, truly transformed because even before I got to that moment, something was already telling me in my spirit, you're not gonna have to speak for yourself in this case.
Wow.
That I'm not going to need to be in the witness stand. But it can sound so crazy because you're such a serious case and obviously somebody has died here, right? This is serious, this is not, it's not a small matter, but yeah, God just really carried me through that. And I just remember seeing my mum up there and having a McDonald's, which was, it was definitely cold by the time I saw her after. But yeah, that for me was a big life-changing moment where I heard God's voice as clear as day saying to pack. And if you talk to people in prison, you only pack if you know you're going home or if the jury are waiting to decide, so you may go home, or if you're going to another prison. You do not pack halfway during a trial with that conviction. Though people may not think you have much, actually, just the whole process of packing and having to unpack if you come back. But I have full faith and confidence. I packed everything, and that was the last day I didn't see Feltham again until I've come back to visit. But that's the story.
Wow, Kenny, well, thank you so much for sharing your story, but also sharing it with us in your book, That Peckham Boy. I know it's going to help so many people. And, you know, going back to that line that says growing up, getting out and giving back. You've told us what it was like for you kind of growing up in church, but also I love what you said about God was in the passenger seat and I was the driver. And, you know, you shared with us about how you came out of prison, which is just a miraculous story. And we're so thankful of how God met you there and just that peace that surpasses all understanding that you spoke about. And now the giving back side. So share with us that, you know, you've come out of prison, your life had already been turned upside down once. It's almost like it's turned upside down again, almost like a clean slate. What do I do? Where do I go? What's the next step? What was that like, having to readjust and also then decide what you wanted to do with your life and what those next steps would look like?
So it was extremely challenging because, and I talk about it in the book, I have a chapter called Ashamed of My Name, because when I came out, one of the first things I did, obviously after I ate and stuff, was, McDonald's in particular, it was easy. Even coming back to the McDonald's point, it's really interesting. Though I spent like 6 months in jail, when I came out, I totally forgot simple things that in McDonald's, for example, you get the straw yourself, you don't have to ask.
Right.
But when you're in an environment where every time you need something, you have to ask someone to open your door. So even things around like locking doors, I'll be forgetful to know, did I actually lock the door or not?
Wow.
And some of these things, obviously, I know people don't really talk about, but even just for me, like I mentioned before, I came out, I Googled my name, and when I saw the things that came in that search around like murder, firearms, all these things there, to at that point, I thought, well, God, how am I going to move forward? If anybody sees this, what are they going to think of me? And how can I get a job? How can I do anything? Like, just how can I just felt like...
Exactly, yeah.
Is this the point where I run away and hide? Do I change my name? So I went through a lot of different kind of action plans. But for me, the key thing, which I do feel very blessed and fortunate about, is that I genuinely feel like God gave me a second chance at life. And I was always praying that if this doesn't break me, then this should make me. And so I did really just start building up my life again. And the one thing that was really valuable for me in that transition, leaving prison, was having the family support.
Yeah.
The mentorship, and just having that whole support network of friends. They were truly invaluable in order for me to get to where I am today. And just having people who I knew from nowhere. And just that, the generosity of strangers. And I think we don't really talk about it enough. And I had those people that came into my life that invested their time, their money, opened up doors for me. So I talk about like Jonathan Toy, but later in my life, like Lord Michael Hastings, there's different people who have been so valuable in terms of my transition, and just also being able to work on my character. Because I feel that's the one thing I knew that God really wanted to work on, that look, I can't live this double life thing that I'm living, and in order for me to show my gratitude, I need to live life how He's called me to live it. And that was a journey in of itself. So it wasn't like I just came out and straight away
ready, I
was ready, but I did go on that journey. And for me, a big part of it was more that I had to give back, because I know how much I've gained, and how much I gained that I didn't deserve either.
Wow. And what does that giving back look like? So talk to us about My Brother's Keeper and also Clearview Research.
Yeah, so in terms of Clearview Research, so I started that. It's interesting, with Clearview, I started that because in prison, one of the things that one of the pastors spoke about at the time, his name's Colin, one Jamaican guy, so he spoke to me, I never forget, he spoke to me about creativity, and that God can give you creative ideas and everything. It's like, look, anything you need, just ask God for it. And I thought, okay, fair enough. And when I was out, I was thinking, what ideas? And I had this idea to do a report, which was very strange, because obviously I'm 18 at the time. Like, why'd you write a report? Like, everyone else does other things. But I felt very passionate and on my heart that, look, I need to write this report talking about issues that happen in areas like mine growing up. And my mentor at the time also did one before. So I was very inspired. So I did this report. I launched this report a year after being acquitted. And this was called the Kenya Report. So I came out November the 9th, 2011, November the 12th, 2012. I was now in the Houses of Parliament launching a report in front of politicians, industry leaders, family, friends. And that for me was such a turning moment, because from that report is then how I got more involved in research. And that report has been mentioned in parliamentary debates, and it's been used by a lot of commissioners and other people. But it got me on this journey of doing research. And then that's how Clearview Research was born, because I also recognize that when you talk about research, a lot of people are never engaged. We never ask a lot of people what is their opinion about things. And so therefore, our whole business is about how do we ensure we're hearing from diverse groups of people, and how do we make research more reflective? Because if we want to understand what do people think, the question is what people. And so we're making sure that people who are usually ignored or not, don't involve themselves in these processes that are involved. And we've been able to work with the likes of like Vodafone, UNICEF, we've done stuff for Parliament, we worked with brands like Twitter, Uber, all these kind of Starbucks, different brands. And it's been an 8.5-year journey, but we've grown from back again to faith. Like when I started, I only had a few £100 in my co-founder, and we've grown from just that to now being a 7-figure company.
Wow.
And just over these years. And I feel like God has truly been very faithful to us on this journey. And when you now think about the young Kenny who was impatient and wanted money fast and quick. Now it's like to be in a place where we can now make millions, but then the real thing for me is how can we donate millions and not just make it? Because I think it's very important when we talk about like how God has worked on me. It's like, particularly around generosity, understanding as a business as well, we have to make sure we are giving back and we are supporting causes, supporting people. And those are the things that really make me excited. It's what I can do with the resources. And when you think about like My Brother's Keeper, we've been doing that for 8.5 years. And even with that has been so special because I've been doing that with Lord Michael Hastings. We co-founded it. And a big part of it was to ensure how do we help men to transform whilst they're in.
Right.
And it's very interesting, like it's not a Christian thing. However, at the same time, what people forget is that, look, the closest a lot of people ever get to Jesus is meeting you.
Yeah.
And that's it. You don't need to give them a verse. You don't need to give them anything. You can just, with your presence and with the fruits that they see and how you live your life, people can be inspired.
Definitely.
And so he's a very strong believer himself. And it's been really powerful and I've learned a lot working with him and working with other men in prison who, many of them have no release date.
Wow.
And so you have to imagine, when I see those men, I also see how fortunate I've also been, because that could easily be me. And on my case as well, 2 of my friends got found guilty and I still go and visit them, I still have that relationship. But even as I visit them and I sit with them on the other side of the table, I'm also reminded that that could have easily been me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So Kenny, you share with us about, you know, where you're at now with Clearview Research, My Brother's Keeper, and just the amazing work that you are doing. But has anyone from, you know, those teenage years, has anyone reached out to you or you know, that you're in touch with that's just like, whoa, this is a totally different person?
Yeah, no, so people reach out to me all the time. And I think for me, it's very important that I'm also available to people who have come from my context and my background, right? Because I think in terms of, I've been very fortunate and blessed to live the life that I now live. Like, I didn't grow up with no privilege at all, let's put it that way, in terms of like a UK context. And I talk about in the book, like my mum did cleaning jobs, did this. So that's how I've grown up. Like I didn't have much, but now I do have a lot that I can give. And people who've come from my area who are still caught up in lives where they may be involved in dealing drugs or fraud or something else, I still feel it's important to be available to those people, because it's also important for them to see what God can do, right? Because they know me, they've seen the stuff that I've been involved in, they know the truth about a lot of the stuff in the book. And for me, I feel like it's so easy to judge people and look at these stereotypes and be like, oh yeah, they're like this, they're like this. And I think that's the one thing I really enjoyed with that Peckham Boy, like when writing it, is really trying to give people a deeper understanding of why do people do this. But I think it really had an impact because people see Kenny of today, but not understanding until this book come out, where have I really come from?
Yeah, who the Kenny was when it was happening.
And the question I always ask people, particularly even from a faith perspective, is like, would you have loved Kenny then? And that
if you knew the story.
If you knew the story.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, that challenges a lot of people.
That's
and also
so
for a
true.
lot of believers, when we talk about prisons and stuff, Jesus has called us to be in these places, right? I was in prison and you visited me. How much believers have never visited anybody in prison?
Yeah.
All they think about is what they have done.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I totally understand that. We should never condone crime. However, at the same time, there's something about our presence and how we can help people to transform. But a lot of believers will not step foot anywhere near a prison.
Yeah.
And though Jesus is very clear, he could have mentioned many places.
Yeah,
he mentioned that in particular. And I feel like that should really challenge people, because when you look at prison, and particularly in one of the ones that we work in, 90% of men there don't get a regular visit.
Wow.
So can you imagine doing a long time, spending 10, 15 years, you never have a regular visit?
And the people that they're around will just be that.
And so whereas you can be that positive contact for somebody.
Yeah.
And so for even with My Brother's Keeper, the reason why it's so impactful and we've had so much interest and even government, other people being so interested in our work, is because we show people love and no judgment. And so even when we get very senior people in government asking how does this work, it's because we are taking values that we've learned biblically in the word and actually just putting that into practice.
Exactly.
There's no rocket science behind it. We are genuinely showing these men love. I've worked with men for years and I can tell you I do not know what many of them are in for, because I have no interest. What I'm interested in is their future.
Yeah.
They have enough people that are interested in their past, what they've done, I just care so much about their future because that's what they're in control of. And it's about, we need to really empower people that when it comes to your life, make sure they're the ones holding the pen. Don't ever let anyone else hold the pen for you when writing the story of your life. And that for me is the power. That's why I feel like that work in prison in particular is so powerful, because they just feel the love. Like, can you imagine, you see a lot of these men when you first meet them, very hard and everything else. And next thing you know, they're hugging, they can't wait to see you. And it's about the consistency.
Yeah.
That's another thing I didn't mention. The fact they know every 2 months, I'm going to see this person. We are probably the most consistent thing in their life outside of their parents, if they're even there.
Wow. Wow.
And for me, there's so much more that we can do. And that's why that work is so in demand, but it's free as well. It's another thing. So we offer it free to prisons, particularly in Swellside. That's the first prison we worked in. We've been there for years now. And we've never asked for 1p.
Yeah.
Even when we do football matches with the men, we buy the kits ourselves and we make sure we buy them very good kits and the best. So I think a lot of times we spend, particularly people in faith, we spend a lot of time in being religious. And we spiritualize too many things and forget actually, what can I do in practice to support people? And I feel like generosity, which I feel is a big value, and just like understanding the importance of that can be so transformational in society. So that's why giving back for me is so big, because I think the more that God gives you, the more you need to give back.
Yeah, wow. Kenny, I love what you've shared with us, because it's the story that you've lived, but it's also something that can challenge us, anyone who's watching this. It can challenge them to actually think, you know, as it says in scripture, what you were talking about was, when I was in prison, you visited me. There's so many instances like that where, you know, sometimes we can push back, we can draw back, and maybe we celebrate when we find out the end, or we see, oh yeah, great, that's all good. But as you said, well, where are we as Christians? Where are we in those places where actually, like you said, 90% of some of those men in prison don't have a regular visitor?
And that's we're meant to be the light, so we should be in the darkest of places.
We should be in those dark places.
But however, what we do, we focus on judging people in those dark places and sit together and commune and in our righteousness.
Yeah.
And what people forget is that no one likes to be judged.
No.
And I think the beautiful thing about the book, which I had to be so honest with, is my past, because we all have a past.
Yeah.
And we all have things that we may not be proud of. However, at the same time with God, He gives us freedom from shame.
Yeah.
And that's why I can write the book and be so honest, because I actually know that that is not me. And what I'm doing now is what He's called me to be. And I do hope, when we talk about the giving back, that one of my hopes from this book is to give people back that sense of understanding that we all have a sense of duty to mentor, to be there for people, and to not pass judgment. Because if people passed judgment on me when I was younger and didn't support me, I would never be where I am today. No. I've had to have people that have looked past, because God does that with all of us. He looks past what we've done and still loves us regardless, even when we don't deserve it. And I feel like if you ever genuinely felt grace, it's so important to extend that to others.
Definitely.
And as someone who's felt that, and I know that I live this life to a lot of people that can be amazing, I get to do all these things here, is if I know I don't deserve this, I can genuinely tell you that, then I know that I should be able to offer that same grace to someone else as well, who people may think doesn't deserve it. And that for me is the key thing. Like, we all have to extend that. Because you have things you don't deserve, and you've got a great life, so do I. And it's just so easy, like I said, to get caught up.
And definitely, I think for some people as well, it can also have that barrier of they feel inadequate, they feel like they don't have the knowledge or the research to go into places, quote unquote, darkness, because I like, why me? I'm unqualified for this. But actually, I love what you've been sharing with us, because it goes past any educational knowledge, it goes past any scientific knowledge and everything, and it's saying no judgment. It's saying extend the grace of the grace that you've been shown. And it's saying, actually, let's not focus on the past. Let's focus on where you are now and your future. And even just that is just so powerful, because we don't need to have this or that to go into those places. Actually, if we have Jesus in us, that's enough to be that light. And to, as you said, you don't need to read all the scriptures to people. It's who you are and what you're showing to people, and the love that you're showing them, the compassion, the grace, that's going to speak volumes.
And because, like, it's interesting, there's one guy we used to speak to on the phone every week, we still do, and he calls myself and Lord Hastings every Sunday morning at 7:30. And it took about 5-6 years till I actually knew what he was inside for.
Right.
Because we had no interest. Even him picking up his Bible and now asking us particular questions, we've never asked him to do that. But what people forget is that that light will shine and people will see that. And it's just so important that, like I said, we just learn to show people love, because that is the key thing. These men, women can always, and when you talk about research, even for me, like even when I deal with people who want to measure everything, I always remind them that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts.
Wow.
Love is so important, but you can never measure it. But when you feel it, you know it. And that's something that we can give to everybody. And that love also comes with consistency. And if you blend the two, you are doing the Lord's work.
Definitely. Oh, so good. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a powerful conversation, and your life has been incredible, and we're so excited to see what else is to come for you. Thank you for sharing with us about Clearview Research and also My Brother's Keeper. And, you know, we have spoken about your book, That Peckham Boy, but there's so much more in this book. So for the viewers at home, thank you so much for tuning in. This memoir is currently in stores and also available as an audio book. And do let us know what you think of the story at TBN UK TV. Until next time, goodbye.